Hi friends, Robin here from Cheese from Scratch, and welcome to part 3 of my Getting Started Making Cheese video series. So for the last 2 weeks, I have been teaching you guys how to make cheese from a very beginner's perspective. In the first video, we looked at how to choose a recipe and what recipes I recommend to start with. In last week's video, we looked at how to source ingredients and what ingredients I recommend having to kind of get started. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at equipment. What equipment do you need to get started making the most basic cheeses, and kind of what can you make do with that you have in your kitchen already? I want to talk a little bit about it from a thrifter's perspective because I have thrifted a lot of my cheese making equipment. So we're going to be talking about that in today's video, and I'm excited to kind of dive right in. So in the first video of the series, we talked about how to pick a recipe to start with. So I had recommended starting with some fresh dairy products, like learning how to keep a clabber culture, maybe learning how to keep some yogurt, maybe learning kefir, and then taking that fresh dairy product, that fresh curd, and turning it into other dairy products. For example, you could turn it into cream cheese by straining it off. You could turn it into cottage cheese by cooking it down. So you honestly probably have everything that you need in your kitchen to start making those simple dairy products. All you're going to need is a pot, a thermometer. I used to like to use any kitchen thermometer, although I do have one specifically for cheese making because I make a lot of cheese. So you can order this off of Cheese Supply Store, off of Amazon. You can get it from a kitchen store, even a grocery store. Just a thermometer that's going to range between anywhere between, I don't know, 60 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but I'm sure all of the thermometers go higher than that. But those are kind of the general ranges that you're going to see when you make cheese. So any kitchen thermometer will do for making those recipes as well as any other cheese making recipe. The next thing that you're going to need is a pot. So you can use a pot that is going to fit your milk, whatever type of pot that you have. It's recommended that you don't use a aluminum pot for cheese making, a non-reactive material, because aluminum is a reactive material. I used to use an aluminum pot in my cheese making, and it eventually did start pitting, and cheese is quite acidic, and that acidity did start eating away at that pot, which is not good for your food. So probably don't use an aluminum pot. Best pot to use is stainless steel. I will use like an enameled cast iron Dutch oven if it will fit in there. So just a pot that's going to hold your milk, hold the amount of milk that you need to make cheese with. Now, when I first started learning how to make cheese, I really didn't have a lot of money. I really didn't have a lot of equipment in my kitchen at all, and I actually started making cheese in my enamel canning pot, like my canning pot where I would water bath jars. And so, looking back on those days, it wasn't the best pot to use for making cheese by any means. You know, the walls of those enamel canning pots are so thin. I don't know if they're really that meant to have that much like food processed in them. I don't know. But anyways, that worked really well for just getting me started making cheese. And then when I could afford it, I bought a better cheese pot. I bought one that would actually fit all of my milk that was stainless steel. And so I kind of invested in that later on. I do recommend that if you are going to be processing really large quantities of milk, that you kind of prioritize that purchase, because it's a pain in the butt with cheese making to have two pots going. And so I know when people are just first starting, they're like, well, I have two pots that are, 2 gallons each. Can I just make one batch in one pot and one batch in the other pot and then combine them? It's really a pain in the butt to do that because you're going to have to be stirring your curds. There's a lot of things that you actually have to do with those hands-on things that you have to do with those curds in that pot. So that's not as ideal. It's nice when it's all in one spot. So that's the pot that you will use for cheese making. If you're making smaller batches, you probably already have one in your kitchen, but if you're making larger batches, that might be something that you will work towards purchasing. But yeah, super simple. Another thing that you can do too is you can heat, if you're making a recipe where you don't actually have to do heating later on, you can heat your milk up in a smaller pot and transfer it to a bucket or something that is going to act as a larger vessel where you can actually do the hands-on cheese making part. So there's a lot of recipes that in that initial heating is the only heating that actually happens. An example of that would be Gouda cheese, because with Gouda, we heat our milk up to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we're taking that milk and we're actually adding in hot hot water during the cheese making process, and this is completing something called washing, but it's also heating that pot up, and it's bringing the temperature of that milk up. So those are some of the cheeses that you could actually complete that with, and maybe cheeses that you would want to start with if you don't have a big vessel to actually make cheese in. So I got ahead of myself. We went on to talk about the pot, but now we're going back to talk about that fresh dairy products and the equipment that you really need. So you need a pot to put them in. You need a thermometer to know what temperature you're getting your milk to. You need a strainer and a cheesecloth. So cheesecloth is something that often people ask me about, like, where do you source cheesecloth? What do you get? So you can buy cheesecloth at the cheese supply store. If you learn anything from this video, it's that don't buy the cheesecloth from the regular grocery store. So the regular grocery store cheesecloth, that's like labeled in like the canning aisle, you'll find it there. It's very, very stringy. I don't know how you, like threads. There's threads everywhere. And if you use that to make cheese, you're gonna just hate it. You'll want to quit cheese making because you'll just be picking threads out of everywhere. It's too thready. So what I like to use is actually flour sack towels. I buy them at Walmart, or you can buy them on Amazon, and you get them in big packs, and they work super good for cheese making. So that's what I use. You can also use muslin baby blankets. You just want to make sure it's kind of light enough that it's not too heavy or anything like that. But yeah, flour sack towels work really good for cheesecloth. And you can probably make do if you have some baby blankets. I used to buy thrifted fabric. I would just buy like white thrifted fabric and cut it up into pieces, and that worked really good too. So that was a cheap way that I was able to do it. I have a lot of strainers in my kitchen, and so I've thrifted all of them. They've all come from thrift stores. I always look for different sizes of them. I have a whole variety of different sizes because I make so much cheese, but really good to have a couple good strainers that you can use when you're making all sorts of different cheeses. Other things you're going to need to use to make those really simple cheeses are measuring cups, measuring spoons, probably already have them in your kitchen. If you keep other ferments in your kitchen, like sourdough or kombucha, any like vegetable ferments, anything like that, you can use the same utensils, but make sure that you're not having like plastic measuring cups or plastic spoons or anything, because they can sometimes hold that bacteria and you can get cross-contamination with natural ferments and cheeses. So I like to use ones that I just keep ones in my kitchen that are easy to clean really well, so that I'm not going to have any cross-contamination. So those are basically all of the things that you need to get started making really fresh, simple cheeses. And you also need those things to start making more complex cheeses. So in that first video that I talked about, I listed feta as being a really great cheese to dive into if you're just kind of learning how to make cheese. You've learned how to make a fresh dairy product, and now you want to make an aged dairy product. Feta is the bee's knees for learning how to make cheese. So feta actually doesn't need much more equipment than what I've already mentioned in this video. You need a good pot, you need a thermometer, you need a strainer. So you need all those sorts of things. The one other thing that you would need, or a couple other things that you would need, is actually a draining pan. So I like to use for my draining pan just like a cookie rack over top of a pan. And so that's going to be your draining rack. So you're going to need that for most of any aged cheeses that you're going to plan on making. So that's a really simple little DIY. You're going to need a cheese form. So feta can actually be made by just forming it in the cheesecloth, so you can let it drain. Watch my feta tutorial below. I'll talk all about that. But you can let it drain in the cheesecloth, and actually just that will be its shape. It will be shaped like a drainage bag. So you could let it go like that, but you can also, if you want to make it into little formed pieces, you can actually have little forms. So I have a variety of different forms because I make a lot of different types of cheeses, but you can see that some of them are homemade. So this one, actually my friend made this one, and she came for my book photo shoot. So actually we'll segue for a minute. I have a book coming out, an actual real life hold in your hands book. It's published through Homestead Living. So they have published books by Lisa Bass from Farmhouse on Boone, Carolyn Thompson from Homesteading Family, and I feel very, very fortunate to have published a book through them. So it's going to be coming out in spring 2025, and pre-sales are going to start at the end of the month. But anyways, why I started talking about that was because my friend came up to help me with a photo shoot, because it's quite the deal to do photos for a cheesemaking book. It took 3 days of like intense photographing. But anyways, I asked her to bring this because I wanted to kind of show in the book how to make your own cheese form. So this is a soft cheese form, which soft cheeses would be feta, brie. I can't think of any others at the top of my head, but there's many soft cheeses. But there's types of cheeses that are going to press with their own weight. They're heavy enough to press themselves down. You're not having to put any additional weight on there. So soft cheese forms are super easy to DIY at home. You can just make them out of yogurt containers by poking holes in it. Yeah, my friend made this one and I was like, please, can I have this? So she left it for me because she did a really good job of the holes on there. Whenever I do it, I just do like slits with a knife and there's just like slit, 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 and it works, but it's not as pretty. So I wanted this for the book photo shoot. Anyways, or you can also use like baskets from salad spinners. So they work really good for soft cheeses. You'll end up with like a massive soft cheese, but they're really similar to these fancy cheese baskets that you can buy online. So really easy to DIY soft cheese forms. The biggest thing when choosing a soft cheese form is you want it to be tall enough. So soft cheeses hold a lot of moisture in their curds. Like for example, feta, if you put it in here, it's probably going to reduce down to like right there. Whereas brie, like if you put it in here, same thing actually, it's going to reduce down to right there. So yeah, they hold a lot of moisture in them. And so you want to make sure that they're tall enough that you're not going to be making a pancake cheese. Like I had some when I like first started that were like this big and they were like the teeniest, flattest little cheese ever. So that's a consideration when you're making any soft cheeses. And so you would want to have a couple of these if you're going to be making feta. You can also, as I said, just use the cheesecloth, but kind of fun to have actual shapes and they are easy to DIY, very inexpensive as well to buy. Like these ones, they came in a 3-pack and I feel like it was like $10 from Amazon. So yeah, not like gonna break the bank or anything to buy it, but if you're just getting started and you just want to practice, you can just make some up as well. So another thing that I recommend, you might need it for feta, you might not need it for feta, but any type of aged cheese, I like to have like a big Tupperware container that would actually hold the cheese, as well as a little rack or mat in the bottom of it. That will keep it elevated off. And so sometimes in really hot temperatures, I'll actually dry my cheeses not on the drying rack, which is this drainage slash drying rack that I talked about, but I'll actually dry them in my aging area in a little container like this. And this is going to keep them from over fermenting. So in the last week's video, we talked about fermentation. And so it's actually going to keep them from over fermenting. This is always also can double as something called a ripening container, which if you want to learn how to set up an aging area, you can check out the video that I'm going to link below. And that teaches you how to set up an aging area, but you don't actually need an aging area when you're learning how to make feta. You can use your regular refrigerator. So that's a cool thing about aging feta is that you can just kind of use the setup that you have. Now, if you're going to make other types of cheeses, for example, Goudas, cheddars, Colbys, Parmesans, you can use your regular refrigerator. It's going to be a little bit harder. Your cheeses are going to age slower. So you might want to consider actually having a designated aging area. And you can check out, yeah, that video below where I talk about how I set it up. I just have like a fridge that is specifically for cheese. Oh, ice just fell through. Anyways, so yeah, you can check out that video below. Also a good thing to have if you're getting into making aged cheeses like Parmesans and Goudas and Colbys as a beginner, it's really nice to have a vacuum sealer. So I also have a video on vacuum sealing. Really, this video series has all been about me just directing you to the videos that I have on this channel. But down below, you can find my video on how to vacuum seal your cheeses and why I choose to do it. You can naturally age cheeses, but as a beginner, it's kind of a little bit overwhelming. You have to learn how to love mold or like deal with mold because cheeses grow mold naturally. And that can be really like kind of a concerning thing when you're first learning how to make cheese because we've been so kind of educated that mold is bad. And so it really is a bit tricky to get your brain around it when you're first starting. So vacuum sealing is a good way to kind of start and not have to deal with mold growth or anything. If you are going to be planning on making any of those fancier aged cheeses where you're actually using a press, you're going to need a designated form that has something called a follower in it. And so you can rig this up. I have a video on how to choose a cheese press and I'll link it down below. I feel like I'm just telling you all the links down below. It's going to be too overwhelming. But you can check out that video down below because I teach you how to set up a cheese press, how to DIY one, how to choose one if you're going to buy one, why I love the one that I have, like all that. lada, 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 all that kind of things. But anyways, really helpful to have a cheese form that actually has a follower in it. These are inexpensive, and if I could go back and do it again, I DIY'd it at first, and I wish I'd just bought one because honestly, the setup was maybe like $15 for the cheese form and the follower. And I had like so many headaches when I was first beginning because I was using like buckets and then I would rig the lid up to be a follower in it, or I was using springform pans, but then my cheeses would be too flat. So it was like a whole thing. But yeah, anyways, you need a follower and then you need some sort of press to press down on your cheese. And so there are all sorts of different presses. Some you can rig up at home. One that's actually not in that video. I need to actually redo that video because there's one that's super simple to make at home and I use sometimes, even though I have a cheese press, is a bucket press. So all you're going to do is you're going to take two 5-gallon buckets. You're going to take your cheese form and your follower. Your cheese is in there, your follower goes on top. You're gonna take some sort of can or something. You're gonna put this into the bucket. And then you're gonna take the second bucket and you're gonna set it in there and you're gonna fill it up with water. Like half full will be like medium pressure. All the way full is like high pressure. So that's a really simple way of setting up a DIY cheese press that actually works really well. So the cheese presses that I talk about in that video that I'm linking down below, they're all kind of ones where I've got books stacked on top, etc. And the problem with those is that they fall over all the time. So this keeps it from falling over, which is very cool. So other than an aging area, that I talked about a little bit. That's pretty much all of the equipment that you need. I might be forgetting a few things, but I think I've mentioned pretty much all of it. So as you can see, a lot of it you could probably have in your kitchen. You can probably DIY just until you figure out if cheese making is actually your thing. Because maybe you just want to try cheese making, you don't want to invest a bunch of money in it. Maybe you can't invest a bunch of money in it. So it's nice to just be able to try it, see if you like it, see what things you actually need. Because I know when I first started, I bought like a cheese making kit and it had all sorts of different equipment and stuff in it. And then I didn't end up using half of it. It just wasn't something that I needed. I wasn't making those types of cheeses. So it's kind of nice to just acquire equipment as you go and with what you need. Thank you guys for watching this video. This concludes my Getting Started Making Cheese series. I've talked about how to choose which recipes you're going to be doing. We've talked about ingredients that you need. We've talked about equipment. And so now you just get to go and start. You get to start with some fresh dairy products like Clabber or yogurt or kefir, and then you get to make some feta, and then you get to choose a cheese recipe that your family really loves. For example, cheddar or Colby or Gouda or any of those types of cheeses, and you get to make that cheese over and over and over again. And that's going to propel your learning. That's going to help you actually learn how to make cheese. So that is the best way to learn, is actually by doing. And thank you guys for watching this video. If you haven't already, click subscribe and also come back next Monday because I post a new video every Monday. Okay, bye guys.